Good afternoon, all participants. I, on behalf of CI Tata Communication Center for Digital Transformation, welcome you all for this very interesting webinar on IoT. Basically, we have two eminent speakers from Tata Communications. I'll be introducing them slightly after a while. But before I talk about them and the webinar proper, I take this opportunity to just slightly touch upon the CI Tata Communications Center for Digital Transformation. I'll just take a few minutes just to introduce about the center, which is hosting this webinar and what all services we do. So before I talk about the center, I'll just talk about the current situation or the digital transformation requirement. So ready or not, digital transformation is reinventing the business as we know. Every enterprise now faces a choice between innovation or extinction. The present situation of COVID-19 is just the same very large extent. Now, the point which I want to highlight here is that digital transformation is not specifically about IT or technology. It's about redefining the entire business strategy, perhaps even changing the organizational culture. To succeed in digital, the company should think of technology not just as a support function, but as a strategic competence. Digital transformation is not just about applying technology to business, it's actually about creating an entirely new business models on the backbone of technology. In other words, I would like to say that this transformation is about business transformation, which requires transformation of the underlying business processes. This in turn is enabled by the technology that has to transform to meet the change in the business processes. And the current situation has proved this, that digital transformation is no more an option, but I would say it's more of a necessity now for the survival. This is a survey which we conducted some time ago, even before the advent of COVID-19. But then this still remains relevant, wherein we just found that the readiness index of the Indian enterprises is found quite lagging with respect to the threshold which has been identified at 4.0 level. And similarly for the solution providers also there is a gap, but the gap is much lower here. Now, when we dig deeper into it for the reasons for this gap, we realized that there were several barriers. There was lack of clear digital operations vision and leadership support. Perhaps that stemmed out of unclear quantifiable economic benefits in digital investment. There's a major need for a skilled workforce capable of supporting this digital shift. There are issues with digital security and privacy, lack of digital standards, norms, benchmarks. There's even scope for better technology collaboration among the solution providers. In fact, we found that there was a gap between the solution seekers and the providers in terms of the commitment of the sales teams of the solution providers who committed something while the product team delivered something, and there was always a gap which solution seekers were not very satisfied with it. And even the SLAs were find buyers towards the service providers to some extent. And the need was therefore felt to provide a trustworthy platform to help the industry in its digital transformation journey. And this is how the Center for Digital Transformation was conceived. The vision of the center is to enable continuous betterment of organizations through digital transformation. We are on a mission to make this digital transformation a movement that transforms India by building systems of intelligence, by bringing in more personal computing, helping organizations adopt intelligent cloud and reinvent their productivity and business processes, thereby enhancing their effectiveness and inclusive growth. In short, the purpose is to help Indian industry become globally competitive. Now, CDT, which is the Center for Digital Transformation, it has certain key interventions, which I'm showing here on the slide. The two main interventions are the digital transformation services and the cybersecurity services. Now, within these two services, we do assessments, advisory, and we also provide the list of solution providers who can help you with the digital transformation journey. In assessment, we are not into an auditing mode. We do a kind of a rating wherein we help you understand the digital transformation requirements and the way ahead for you to proceed in your journey. Similarly for cybersecurity. And out of these two main pillars stem out the other two pillars, which are the skills and the outreach programs. What I mean to say here is that for skills or the outreach program that we do, it will always be related to one or both of the services that are our foundational pillars. Within skills, we conduct skill programs, study missions, technology demonstrations. In the outreach programs, we have various things, for example, reports, awards, seminars, summit, workshop, roadshows, a number of things. For example, this specific webinar could be clubbed under both the skills and the outreach program. We are trying to skill people on IoT, which is a very, very important aspect for digital transformation journey, be it for your personal use, your vehicle, your house, your office, your medical, anything, anywhere in the world. IoT has a lot of scope to improve your way of life, living, efficiency, improvement in business, name it, and it is there. Now, within the Center for Digital Transformation, we have developed something called DEXEL. DEXEL is the Digital Transformation Excellence Model, which was launched last year in our flagship event of this Digital Transformation Summit and Awards, which was held in December last year. And it was very successfully accepted by the industry. This is unique in the sense because this has been developed by the industry for the industry. Now, this is the model on which we carry out our assessments. I will just briefly touch upon the main parameters of this rating system. The DEXEL is based on 5 major dimensions, which are strategy, structure and governance, business processes, technology, culture and talent of the organization. Now, within all of these dimensions, there are various sub-dimensions which I don't want to deep dive right now because it will take huge time to explain all of these dimensions with the details of the sub-dimensions. Now, these are the 4 dimensions, and finally is the business benefits dimension. Now, this business results cuts across all the above dimensions horizontally. What I mean here is that while we are doing the assessment rating for any of the dimensions or the sub-dimensions, business results are taken into account simultaneously in each of the dimensions. This helps us understand the final goal of business results much better. We have been conducting various skill building programs for courses for cybersecurity and various things. Courses have been conducted in Delhi, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Mumbai. We are working on it. But with the current situation, we shifted to the online mode also. Now, even these online sessions are not a typical online class which happens. This is again a one-to-one session where the instructor is physically available and the queries and doubts are cleared immediately. And it's almost a personalized touch course that we conduct for various things. For our outreach programs, we have conducted various workshops, seminars, and the list is huge. We had our flagship event, which I talked about, the Digital Transformation Summit and Awards in 2019. It was very well received by the industry and it was very successful. I'd like to just bring out about the Digital Transformation Best Practices Awards. It's a unique award that we have implemented, wherein the industry people can share their best practices in the field of digital transformation, which has helped them improve their business. This will help also others to adopt the best practices and need not require to reinvent the wheel. And therefore, we propagate the digital transformation as an overall motive. Now, before I hand over to Lalit for the webinar proper, I'll just take a few minutes to brief the 2 stalwarts who will be talking about the IoT today. They are Mr. Lalit Mishra and Mr. Rajiv Desai. Lalit currently heads the sales and strategic engagements for Internet of Things business unit at Tata Communications. With more than 3 years in this role, under his leadership, unit closed many $1 million deals in IoT. He has also led excellence in several other functions in the company. Prior to this, he spent time in leading sales effectiveness and automation programs, consulting and cloud computing implementations for global enterprises across industry for more than a decade and a half. Well traveled across the world with assignments in North America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Africa, and Australia. I mean, across the world, I should say. He recognizes and respects different cultures, value systems, and the way of doing things. He is able to synthesize ideas, styles, and approaches to be effective in multicultural and multifunctional environment. So we have a lot to learn from Lalit. Coming to Rajiv now. Rajiv Desai is a business development and management professional associated with Tata Group since 2002. He has worked in various companies such as Tata Sons, Tata Consultancy Services, Tata Communication Transformation Services. He has also executed strategic projects with Tata Chemicals, Tata Steel Wires Divisions, Rallis, Tata Auto Components, Tata Insights, Qantas, Voltas, Tata Business Excellence Groups, Tata Power, Metahelix, Advinus. Overall, he is a generalist with experience and knowledge across strategic planning and execution, conceptualizing oblique operationalizing, new businesses, business oblique market development, customer oblique partner relation management, digital-led business transformation, operations and delivery management, etc. In his current role, he is working in Tata Communications IoT business unit as the business owner for the IoT-enabled human safety products, solutions, and services. Again, a lot to learn from Rajiv as well. So without taking any much more time, I'll hand over the stage to Lalit. Before that, I'll just hand over the screen to Saikat to have the presentation being displayed. Just give me a minute. Lalit, over to you meanwhile.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, Colonel Zedi. That was a great introduction, and I am so glad to be here with all of you today to talk about what IoT can actually do to enterprises, and to continue to sort of, for enterprises to remain efficient. If you guys don't mind, I actually have a little bit of an issue with my video, so I'm going to just turn off my video. My children are here sharing the same bandwidth, and I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. My audio is absolutely fine. That's why I'll just go and stop my video. Colonel Zedi, that should be okay, right?
Yes, please. That was exactly the same reason why I didn't switch on my video.
All right. Okay. We're all in the same boat. Okay, let's get going. So we have a slide deck that we are going to use. Obviously, this is just to make sure that we are able to, not let any of the important topics go really. So just one slide on who we are. Tata Communications, as some or as most of you would actually know, we are a leading provider of digital infrastructure services to enterprises. While we have a leadership position in India, we have a very high global footprint as well. Our customers can actually reach to almost 99.7% of the global GDP using our network and services. That's the footprint that we have. Over 25% of the world's internet routes actually use our network. We are a B2B company, so not most of this information is sort of known in public. But that's the role Tata Communication plays in each and everyone's life here in this country and beyond. We are also the world's 5th largest wholesale internet service provider. We actually connect 4 out of 5 global mobile subscribers as part of our voice network. We have invested about 1.5 billion, building the only wholly owned subsea cable network that circles across the globe. That's on the global side. In India, we actually have top customers across most of the large enterprises. Most of the top ET 500 companies are actually our customers in India. So that should say a lot about us. We also have a lot of strategic government customers. Most of the government, strategic sort of installations and implementations, such as, government e-marketplace, passport seva kendra, and many others are actually with us. We also serve a large range of MSME customers through our partners, and we have almost all service providers as some of our large customers here in India as well. We are a leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant for network services globally for about 7 years in a row now. So for the last 7 years, consistently, we've been winning the leadership, title in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Frost and Sullivan Best Practices winner in 8 categories. We have been customer experience leader as latest as 2019, and one of the highest NPS, the Net Promoter Scores in the industry, is what we actually enjoy. Our products, and how do we sort of get to all of this? Our products includes mobility and IoT, and IoT is what we're going to zoom in today. We also do unified collaboration and communication services. We do Net Foundry, which is a very interesting and a unique platform that enables enterprises to obtain security and performance, on a private network, which can then be done on internet access. We also do next generation connectivity, voice, as you all know. We just talked about how much of the voice penetration we have across the world, and we also do cloud, edge, and security services. Second, next slide, please. So in our next 45 minutes or so, or maybe an hour or so that we have left, for the speakers to speak, we are going to be covering 4 major areas. These are going to be what are we looking at from COVID disruption, big changes on the Indian business that we see due to the COVID disruption, how is the new normal going to look like, and what can technology do to the rescue, right? So if you look at the next slide now, which talks about world at a fulcrum of change, this number that shows you 4.5 million people affected, actually this morning went to more than 5 million. More than 5 million people are infected across the world, more than 300,000 deaths. And these figures, I'm sure each one of you already know. Now, this virus is neither the most deadliest nor the most contagious, but the world has actually stopped because it's highly connected physically, leading to a huge demand crunch. Our global economy was actually weak anyways, even before COVID. Now they are projecting a 3% reduction in global GDP. And you could compare the maps, the world map of 2019 to 2020, and see how red it has actually gone from green. So global economy was weak, and COVID has drawn it to a further recession, almost to a major financial crunch, which is actually looming upon us. 27.4 is April Purchasing Manager Index in India, which is lowest in history, and anything below 50 is considered to be going into recessions. These are real numbers which are published by various various consulting organizations or various other forums, really. So there's a panic driving decisions and sentiments, as the situation is very new and it's also very unknown, and hence there is a lot of uncertainty across the supply chain that we see. Now there are also evolving preferences. If you, for example, look at this number here, 53% of the customers today are ready to share personal details for tracking infection. That's by EY, Ernst & Young research. What that means is that until just before COVID, we were so sort of unsure about if we want to share our data. But just after COVID, we are happy to use apps like Arogya Setu and several others, which can enable our location tracking and more using on the Bluetooth. So there are trends that we are seeing. There is constant evolution in the preferences that we are seeing. That's currently happening across the value chain. There is a society first approach being seen among consumers, optimistic products and experiences, and hygiene is becoming the number one priority and a number one customer attractor. Second, next slide, please. So on COVID disruption across functions and sector and way of life, that's the title of this slide. How is COVID causing disruption across function sectors and overall way of life we are actually all used to living? On supply side, if you see, and so this slide is divided into 2 sections, supply side and demand side. On supply side, if you see, there are unexpected fluctuations in the prices of raw material. I'm sure anybody who's part of manufacturing or even services would actually have felt it. There are production shutdowns, minimizations, completely sort of production going down somewhere. Most of the places, in fact, labor has either left or is being laid off or has been sent on a long leave. Cash flow is a big constant, as everyone is actually trying to hold back on payments across the value chain, right? And due to all of this, there is a broken supply chain. And since all of this is global, there are restrictions on imports, procedures being changed and causing delays. In fact, our own goods actually got stuck at the imports and customs office in Mumbai for more than 45 days, and that actually delayed our own sort of delivery to one of our marquee customers in West. And this actually happened much before the lockdown. as the procedures to the customers were actually not clear. So imagine, a small sort of change in process and uncertainty can lead to what kind of an impact later. On the demand side, if you see, there are lockdowns and there are very high movement restrictions across, and there is a fear factor among consumers of all size and types, whether you're talking about business to consumers, business to businesses, e-commerce included. Our exports are completely down due to all other issues that we have just talked about, and your logistics included, your travel across the borders is completely shut. Next slide, please. So COVID disruption continued. Now we're looking at, just going to zoom down a little bit on the operations heavy sectors. And what we have done is we have, picked up some high impact industries to medium impact industries and to the low impact industries as part of this slide. Some of the high impact industries in the area of very high operations starts from, say, aviation. So in aviation, as we all know, all airlines are shut. There's a new low and aftermarket service due to the low traffic. Domestic outbound travel and inbound travel to India is actually going to be an all-time low. So it's a very high impact industry, really, right? And there's obviously a cash crunch there as well. Going to the second one, which is real estate and construction industry, there are issues like there is going to be a lower footfall in retail, hospitality. There's obviously a delayed delivery for the projects which are not finished. There is going to be an issue in terms of raw material, labor, unavailability, and so on. And then something that used to happen much better in terms of the FDI money coming into the countries, that's actually going to be impacted. It's going to be put on hold on account of limited new leasing activity due to the existing industry shutdown and potential change in user habits. So how many sort of new malls or new offices we would actually need going in future. Tourism is going to be another industry that will be severely impacted. There is going to be a lot of travel restriction, not just for leisure, but even for business. And there's going to be a continuous fear among customers. There's obviously going to be a lot of staff unavailability as well. In terms of the medium impact, if you look at auto has an interesting sort of dynamic. Based on some of the reports and research that we saw, we figured out that individual car ownership may set to increase, right? Why? Because a lot of people will actually not want to travel in a shared or in a public transports, kinds really. There's obviously also going to be a demand on auto ancillary companies because they may do well. Why? Because a lot of people would actually like to endure their vehicles for a lot longer. So instead of buying a new car, can I just, use my existing car for a few more years? Oil and gas, there's going to be a raw material price volatility. There is going to be a broken supply chain, low demand, as there is going to be a low mobility across, and this is across the world again. Mining, in terms of mining, we're looking at low production, financial crunch. Again, the issues are similar, worker unavailability, and that's also an industry which has a recession hit demand going on. Apparels, again, a huge export sector. There's going to be an issue of labor, financial crunch, material availability, because most of the raw material is going to be, seeing challenges to come into the country. Exports, therefore, are going to be at an all-time low. Chemicals, financial crunch for small and medium enterprises. There are indications of material price fluctuations and labor availability issues here again. The low impact industries, if you look at, are going to be pharma. So we all know that pharma stocks have just been going up in the last few weeks. But pharma again has an issue in terms of labor, and most of the pharma raw material comes from outside. So that obviously will also face issues. In terms of FMCG, the raw material price change and availability. And changing, channel and customer preferences. So we have seen, how we all have been ordering the FMCG really. There are preferences being changing across the set of customers. Now, looking at all of this and utilities, I didn't touch upon utilities, but on utilities, we are looking at the revenue collection getting impacted because there is a contact there. One has to go and actually collect the consumption and the billing. And there is going to be a consumer sentiment that's going to drive low consumption. So because people's incomes are hurt, they would want to use less electricity, less gas, and so on. Now, while all of this is happening, the overall timeline of recovery, according to some of these reports, is actually going to be from Q2 20, your quarter 2 of fiscal year 22, about quarter 4 of fiscal year 21, is what we are looking at. Next slide, please. So that's the COVID disruption. How are the Indian businesses getting impacted is what we're going to talk about next. But before we go there, next slide, please. Yeah. So what's been the government response to counter COVID and push growth? And I'm sure we all know about what Indian government has been doing. If you look at this slide, it has a chart which tells you about how global coronavirus stimulus packages compare across the major countries in the world. So from Japan, which is more than 21% of GDP, is what they have put in as part of stimulus package, all the way to India, which is 10%, and South Korea at 2.2. Um, some of the things that will actually happen in government response, we all have seen the government response really. I think, in India, they actually started with a very, very strict lockdown. I think that was the strictest lockdown across the world. But by and large, in terms of responding, by mid of last month, most governments were actually in a respond phase. They were responding immediately to what was going on. They were dealing with an immediate crisis. Governments were really moving fast and bypassing many typical procedures. They were ordering business closures, curtailing travel, reallocating industrial capacity to meet urgent medical needs. For example, we saw automobile companies, being asked to manufacture ventilator machines and so on. And government was also busy in providing immediate financial assistance. Some country, in fact, mostly some in southern hemisphere, were actually yet to experience the crisis back then. Now the government is actually moving into the recovery phase. So as the immediate danger of COVID eases, or I'm not sure if it actually eases because the numbers are only going up, but let's say we accept the fact that it's actually here to stay. Governments will now enter into the recover phase, shifting their focus to steepening the curve of the economic recovery and to mitigating the broader impacts of the crisis. Public institutions, as we all know, have begin to come back to normal. Governments are still sort of moving swiftly. They're still possibly shortcutting some traditional controls, and with much lesser unilateral executive actions. From here, we hope that government goes into the thriving mode. Having survived the crisis, most of the governments will actually consider long-term improvements to public operations to ensure they can respond effectively to future risks by becoming more digital. And that's where the digital transformation, piece that Colonel Zedri touched upon a while will actually come in very handy. Government will have to look at revisiting supply chains and monitoring for even future pandemics by the use of data, is what we hope. Old rules and regulations should, and I think will be reevaluated. It will actually allow technologies that have shown their effectiveness during the crisis, such as telehealth, safety applications, remote working made possible, um, and to become even more permanent with options in government. And similar guidelines should actually be issued to industries at large. And in fact, we actually saw a ruling coming in for government for ministry for MSME industries in terms of what they should be doing when they actually open up their shops. So while each government will find its own unique path throughout the three phases, all will likely to face common challenges, including the efforts needed to become better prepared for the next crisis. Next slide, please. Now, we talked about government, we talked about world as a whole. Let's just zoom in now in key changes across businesses. What are we seeing across businesses happening? Now, what we did was, based on, again, most of the research and reports that we saw, we actually divided this into 4 sections. Remote working. In terms of remote working, I think there are going to be government mandated lockdowns and travel bans in pockets, which may balloon. For example, I live in Gurgaon, and I'm sure most of the people who are in the NCR area would actually know that Delhi is either red or deep red, really, right? So, the entire city and state can actually go as into a red zone, and this will continue. These travel bans and lockdowns in areas will actually continue till a full cure is invented. Also, beyond that, a lot of voluntary quarantine will actually happen due to healthcare across the set of employees. So in terms of remote working, that's what we're looking at is going to happen across businesses. Also, there's going to be a part of financial distress, really. In terms of financial distress, I think a lot of self-reinforcing recession will happen due to supply and demand side inactivity. Both supply side, there is a lot of inactivity, and demand side is obviously hit as well. The cash flow gap that we'll see, at least not in the short term, we'll be able to fill with market borrowing, and therefore it might also lead to defaults. In terms of health and safety compliance, preventive measures to avoid community spread. One has to look at, how do you reduce the fear among employees, not just employees, even customers and vendors. And one has to also look at how do you avoid legal and financial liabilities entailing health risk at work. So that's on the health and safety, compliance side. On the sourcing redesign, one will have to look at issues coming on, from broken Chinese supply chain, which, and by the way, Chinese supply chain constitutes about 14% of total Indian imports. There is uncertainties looming on local sourcing, restricted material movement, and overloaded logistics capacity that we currently have. So far, these four areas, but then what does that actually lead? So just sharing an example with you that, before COVID, we were seeing a lot of manufacturing kind of setups asking us for, people tracking and tracing, assets tracking and tracing and all that. And now this is sort of going very swiftly even to the services side, whether it's a BFSI kind of an organization or an IT services kind of an organization. Any organization which is deploying a large workforce, no matter whether it's blue collar or white collar, would want to, make sure that the people are not overcrowding. One is able to track the person's movement and track history of where the person has visited in the work area, and being able to, quickly identify and help to not, spread the disease, if you will. So these are the four broad areas. But what does that leads to? While all this is fine, these are all the issues that we are talking about. There has to be a recovery strategy too. So let's look at the next slide, second. Now let's look at this domino effect on value chain. What's happening here really? There is a dominoes effect. The lockdown began, which led to what? Halted production. Halted production happened. The migrant workers started to go back. By the way, I personally don't like the term migrant worker, because I myself am a migrant really. But what has happened is, because of the lack of better term, we all have started, calling them as migrant workers. But they were as much part of the cities that they actually worked for last several years, if not less. Anyways, so yeah, the migrant workers, started to go back, and all this led to what? The low sales until the lockdown opens up, until the lockdown ends, in fact. And then it has to start to recover with natural sales recovery due to the customer demand. So there is a customer demand, and there's obviously also a pent up customer demand. But eventually it has to bounce back. And how will that happen? So if you look at our thoughts, the companies which have been operating with excellent operational parameters, like high quality, high productivity, and they have well-trained workmen, they also have well-maintained machines, so there are a lot of preventive maintenance and so on, will be able to take off faster than the others. And therefore, for well-managed companies, the period after lockdown would actually be an opportunity. While for others who are not so well managed, it could actually become an uphill struggle. During the lockdown period, which is this period that we are sort of going, and hopefully getting to the fag end of it, the good companies must develop their recovery plans, while the not so good ones will actually be able to develop their survival plans really. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about three major, approaches what we're looking at. So there is a cost reduction strategy. So if a company applies, a cost reduction strategy, and for example, let's say if company's labor cost is about 20% of its sales, then if employees take a pay cut, let's say for rest of the year of say 10% on an average, with senior employees taking even a higher percentage, then the cost reduction on this account alone will actually increase the profitability by 0.2% per annum. Now, this no doubt is a major sacrifice. One doesn't want to give away the compensation of the salary, but look at the number here is about 20% of the sales. The cost of your business is actually your compensation and your salary. But what could be other option? The other option is actually to let the job losses happen, and that's not a preferred option really. The second one that we're looking at here is higher revenue strategy. So one is the cost strategy. The second one is higher revenue strategy. How do you get there? Well, increase in revenues is actually possible in cases where there is a pent up sales, right? So there's a pent up sale that will materialize, provided these organizations are able to supply goods. Now, who are the organizations who will actually supply goods? Clearly, those companies who have kept their supply chain pipelines active, they will benefit and they can recover some of their sales. This will also be affected by how the competition is getting up, by the way. And hence, in our view, excellent companies can use this opportunity. This could contribute to another 0.5 to 1% of the PAT to sales ratio in these organizations by applying a higher revenue strategy. There could also be a third one, which is new product strategy. This is a direct outcome of the corona effect, which will last for at least one more year in our view, if not more. Certain goods, especially related to healthcare, are likely to show high demand, and we all know how many masks we all have actually bought, and how many hand sanitizers we have bought, and how many Medicines we have stocked up really, right? But this could also lead to a cascading effect through stimulating demand in related products, and obviously also a psychological effect that could lead to a general demand pickup. Second, next slide, please. Why Indian manufacturers need to evolve? Well, if you look at this slide, and again, these are various research and analysis that we have tried to, club together here. 7% additional return on sales through productivity improvement in production planning, supply chain, and management and quality across Indian manufacturing is what McKinsey research says. One can also look at reducing, operating costs by 3x in terms of fixing quality, supply chain issues, and any process efficiencies there and all that to enable a long-term sustainability and leadership. This current crisis brings a set of opportunities and threats as well with it, really, right? So while this McKinsey study says there could be up to 7% increase in return on sales through productivity improvements in production planning, better supply chain management and quality, as well as the chance of very high reduction in operating costs that I just talked about, which can enable a long-term sustainability and leadership. But at the same time, there could be a loss in productivity considering areas like health risk, lockdowns, very limited mobility, and remote accessibility due to lack of infrastructure. And there's also a risk on manufacturing exports due to disrupted supply chain and unavailability of foreign value-added components, and something that even we have sort of been on the victim side as far as that goes. Second, next slide, please. So while all of this is happening on, due to COVID disruption, we talked about big changes on Indian business. Before we get on to the next one, let's do a quick poll here. Second, is that a poll slide? Yeah. So as we look to move out of pandemic, when do you think we will be able to do the recovery? That's the question, Saikat, I think. And I think the poll starts now. There are options there if you could just pick and choose. There's a 1 minute limit for this. So all you have to do is to just select the right radio button. And second, do we see the results right away or?
We'll see it right away.
Okay. Okay, I think the time is up. Wow. I think, yeah, so I think audience feels that it'll take far longer to get through to the to the crisis really. Yeah. No, I think the sentiment is what in line with what we are hearing and so on. However, as I was saying, there are best practices that one could actually look at implementing across organizations of different sizes and types and all that. Let's look at the next slide now. I'm actually getting to go into a new normal. And the second, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, the next slide, which talks about the new normal cycle. Yeah. So the new normal is going to be built on this six sort of loosely put pillars, if you will. First, and we all know, is a shift towards localization. So COVID, along with ongoing geopolitical environment, as we know what's happening in the US, what's happening in China and rest of the world, there is a recessionary climate that is leading to a lot of protectionism, right? And risk aversion among essential and strategic sectors. We are hearing news on countries like Japan and US calling back some of their large brands to bring back the core manufacturing back home, which comes with big incentives, by the way. So Japan is giving a lot of incentives for their companies to go back to Japan. US has started giving a lot of incentives for companies to come back to the US, while they may have a lot of issues for not being able to do manufacturing in the US, but that's my personal opinion. They'll have a lot of labor issue and all that. But coming back to home in India too, we all know that we are being asked to use and promote more and more local brands, right? So there's a clear shift towards localization. Um, One will have to look at a resilient supply chain. So we'll have to ensure a supply chain resiliency. Supply chain localization is obviously vital, but it will come with its own challenges because of the fact that the word has been sort of won so far, and it was all integrated really. Now to be able to look at the supplies within, it's actually going to be a lot challenging. So hence, an integrated and transparent supply chains to ensure resiliency is actually going to be a must. So that's the second pillar that I was talking about. One, we'll have to look at going digital very, very quickly. So these are the times for, it can't be a better time, for us to go for a digital transformation. Work from home, remote working trends, man and machine tracing, real-time information from assets, all of this have hit the fast forward buttons in the last 2.5 months and so on, really, right? While it does comes, it does provides immediate opportunity to drive efficiencies. This crisis has highlighted the importance of investment in enabling technologies like cloud, data, and cyber security. Tata Communications is actually at the forefront and at the center of it, by the way. So this will change the way we work with far-reaching implications on B2B, B2C, even business to government services, commercial, real estate, e-commerce, e-governance, cybersecurity, process automation, data analytics, and including self-service capabilities, etc., are actually going to be the talk of the town, really. The third pillar talks about building remote sensing and control towers. So this is where the data comes at the for the rescue, really. So data can offer insights into processes with shorter time lag, which will eventually enable for productivity through right business decision making. This puts emphasis on digital control tower, digital twins, and analytics. Right, and then, for instance, analytics companies are now mining alternative data such as traffic jams, food orders, etc., to track COVID-19 shock. Right, so with the amount of data that we can actually collect through traffic jams and all that, one could start to sort of collate information on where the spread could actually happen faster. Again, how beautifully analytics and data can actually play a role. CapEx light agility. One of the biggest lessons, among other, that we have learned is the importance of reducing overall business cost. One significant way to accomplish this is to convert fixed costs to variable costs. So going from CapEx to OpEx, wherever it's actually feasible and possible. For instance, business will now determine what they must keep in-house and explore outsourcing the rest so that the fixed cost can be lowered. As with other trends, this will further impact the labor force and quote unquote how they work, contract manufacturing, supply chain considerations, etc. And the last and the most important, I think, cash is going to be the king. Highly leveraged companies are under a lot of pressure, as most of us know, right? And we've been seeing news almost on an everyday basis. Combining this with the current market scenario that we have, it has reiterated the importance of conserving cash. Now, what I would like to do is to sum this by saying that this crisis is really a kind of a story with an uncertain ending. What is definitely clear is that COVID has introduced new challenges to the business environments, which call for a measured, practical, and informed approach from political as well as business leaders. I think the corporate leaders have actually a far more major role to play here. We also realize that COVID is a new normal. Being aware of and preparing for these shifts will actually help businesses and economies navigate in the post-COVID world. I would actually now hand over to Rajiv for the rest of the session. Rajiv, over to you.
Am I audible? Okay. Yeah, thanks, Lalit, for providing a macro view of the disruption and the new normal which has been driven by COVID. As while you can see on the slide, I mean, it's more talking about what are the technology trends, while Lalit did touch upon a few of them. So in these times, technology will play a major role towards not only mitigating the operational risk, but also drive a new business model. Almost all of us are already experiencing right now as we speak the borderless workspace, right? Both in terms of the benefit that it provides, plus the nuances that it brings into picture. This could very well become the new norm in going forward into the future. We will see a very renewed vigor towards Industry 4.0 adoption, which will be again fueled with further automation, leveraging IoT, any kind of remote monitoring, and as well as AI. Supply chains, Lalit did touch upon the resiliency that needs to be built into the supply chain, plus also the kind of models that you want to put into your operations. More and more digitization will happen as we go ahead into supply chain. Blockchains will start making entry. I mean, they've already started making entry into supply chain, but I think we will see major dents happening through blockchain into supply chain visibility as well as authenticity. As we advance into all the supply chain issues, the localizations of the world, we believe that 3D printing will take a major role. It will play a central role towards any kind of rapid prototyping and also trying to figure out local sourcing and local supplies as well. Finally, or not finally, the one of the key things which will change is experience economy, or what we like to call that EE economy. Experience economy is nothing but everything and anything that we are going to do digital, right from your e-commerce to delivery automations to online tourism. All of these are actually happening as we speak. I think the other day I read somewhere that African safari, the Kenyan safari, have actually started online experiences of Kenyan safari. They are doing this through VR sets and through augmented reality sets. This is going to be the new norm, at least for the foreseeable 18-20 months or so. Last but not the least, and something which I think Lalit also faced and I am also facing, in terms of having a very resilient, secure, and stable connectivity with far more data speeds, thereby at least enabling us to also have video and audio and all of these things going together. This will be the new trend. 5G is here to stay. It will come up very closely along with your VPNs and cybersecurities. While we read about all this new game-changing technologies, in the same time, in the last few weeks, we have also come across a lot of frugal innovation or jugards, which is sort of a second nature to all of us as well. Saikat, can you move to next slide? So as Indians, we do take pride in coming out with very simple, frugal, effective solutions. Let it be any kind of a low cost clay fridge known as Me Too Cool, or the our own Tata Swatch low cost purifier, or even the Mangalyaan for that matter. I mean, we have got below the radar inventors across the country innovating, providing low cost solutions. And I'm sure in coming days, we will be hearing about more and more simple innovations trying to impact the COVID norms, such as social distancing and contactless deliveries and all of these things. As you could see in the slides, which are, I mean, we have just posted out some of the images. I'm pretty sure social media is full of such viral images around. Similar to local innovations, businesses also need to reimagine their value chain. Saikata, can you move to next slide? So as we heard, I think in the previous section, Lalit did touch upon the 4 key levers which are getting impacted through COVID and also impacting businesses globally, such as remote working, workplace health and safety, need for a sourcing redesign, and the overall financial distress that companies are actually facing. These are creating a ripple effect across the business value chain, right from operation, supply chain, infra to customer and partner services. This sort of merits for businesses to start reimagining their existing processes, initiatives, and objectives. For example, due to remote working, companies now I think will have to start ensuring remote equipment availability, ability to monitor, ability to diagnose equipment sitting remotely. At the same time, also having an end-to-end visibility of their material movement. Health and safety norms will lead to development of different kind of SOPs. I'm pretty sure in your companies, there would be certain SOPs which would be formed in terms of entering into common areas, entering onto operations area, entering onto plant floors. Multiple technology tools and equipments will start focusing towards how do we ensure health and safety and a safer work environment for our employees. Financial distress definitely will lead to further cost reduction measures, and any kind of advanced planning, any kind of predictive planning that we can actually build into our systems will further help towards ensuring that we have better cash flow and position. Last not the least, sourcing redesign. Now this is again connecting back to the localization mantra, as well as the dependency on the imports that we have from various countries. Sourcing redesign and try and evaluate and try and build in a resilient sourcing system is going to become the key towards this. All said and done, technology will sort of keep on helping people, helping companies towards achieving that. At this juncture, businesses need to prioritize operational efficiencies, cost optimizations, and trying to improve their cash cycles. Next slide, please, Saikat. So we touched upon the COVID disruption. We touched upon what is the impact that it is having on the Indian business, the new normal in terms of the macro parameters as well as the technology trends, and what eventually businesses will start getting impacted into. The crux of the matter is technology eventually will play a major role towards the reimagination agenda that companies will have to adhere to. While we talk about a lot of initiatives, we talked about various areas, the key question always remains is how to prioritize and how to go about executions. Enterprises can actually look at a three-phased execution approach, which is targeted towards resolving the existing immediate need, followed by building resilience and resistance to not only mitigate risks, and finally starting on the reimagination cycle towards reimagining your operations and business models. All of these will take time. All of these are a lengthy affair. For example, the overall immediate need of the hour for most of the companies is trying to ensure and how do we get our plants operational? How do I get our facilities operational? Which could also mean towards building resource efficiencies across man, machine, material. There are multiple technologies. Now, if you look at the slide, I mean, there are a bunch of initiatives which are cutting across the three phases. And there are a bunch of technologies, solutions which are available through IoT, through enterprise application, through connected employee solutions, through video-based controls, augmented reality, virtual reality, you name it, and every initiative will have a technology option available. Still, the idea still remains that how do we initiate this journey? How do we make it more effective? And how do we go towards faster adoption? Saikat, can you move to the next slide? While we did talk about technology adoption is need of the hour, but technology adoption, while essential, is also complex in nature. As you could see on this 2x2 chart, we have tried to depict a few initiatives which we have seen, which could be essential in terms of enterprises to kickstart their operations, and we have tried to map it onto 2x2, try and analyze what is it that enterprises could focus upon. The roadmap has to be towards resolving the immediate needs, and also try and see which are the quick wins and which are the high potential ones which we can actually go after. Some of them could be towards resource monitoring and management, connected employees, inventory management, preventive and predictive maintenance. Now, all this sort of again circle back to the same objective in trying to conserve cash, trying to see what best can we do, how can we kickstart our operations, what are my immediate requirements to get me kickstarted. All of these eventually has to lead to sustainability, ensure that these enable you to govern your processes better, and also eventually prepare the organization for a lean and an agile structure. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. I mean, if you look at the Gartners of the world and all, it's even difficult to figure out what initiatives are there. But all said and done, the idea being that even when you start putting your initiatives in place, there has to be a long-term vision in place, trying to see how do we want to achieve each and every one of the objectives that we laid out into. Apart from these solution or these technology challenges, there are some ground realities which I think which we in the market, when we go and talk with customers, when we go and talk with technology companies, we figure out. Second, can you go to the next slide? So some of the challenges we have just listed down here. So enterprises have started working towards solving the current operational challenges via technology, but mostly there is either no budget allocated to that, or the budget is very limited. I mean, the COVID pandemic has actually hit all of us right in the middle of our budget cycles, and eventually that's where I think the struggle is coming. While companies want to invest, want to evolve, budgetary constraints are still there, and that will remain to be in at least in the next 1 or 2 quarters that we are seeing. The second issue that eventually comes up is there are too many players in the market, too many technologies available in the market, leading to further selection confusion which happens in terms of, first of all, it's the idea is towards defining the initiative, defining the roadmap, and then when you're going towards technology selection, this is something which again is a hindrance coming out of it. Out of most of the solutions which are out there in the market, which sort of, let's say for example, solve your basic resource efficiency problems or solve your basic connected employee problems, lot of this solution, or I would not be wrong in saying most of the solutions are primarily in POC or pilot stages itself. Companies themselves are trying to figure out what works best in what use cases, what scenarios. Last but not the least, because of the current crisis that we are into, companies have started thinking very short term in nature, and thereby the selection of a right technology, selection of a right solution also gets impacted and also gets biased beyond this. While we are covering, while we have covered a lot of broad initiatives, the execution strategy, the challenges that you are facing, we would also like to understand from you what are the key problems your organization is focusing on, and what do you believe that organization should sort of get into it, and that is sort of a poll question that is to come up. So Saikata, can we put up that poll question, please? So guys, I mean, these are some of the some of the first cut problems that we have actually heard from the market, and we would like to hear your views in terms of what your organization is actually facing, or where the focus of the organization is there. I think we've got around 1 minute to answer, and I think as Colonel Zaidi mentioned, I think we'll be able to see the live results here itself. Yeah, maybe see the results. Wow. So I think mostly manpower availability, remote monitoring, automation of field operations. These three seem to be the hot topic, and I mean that sort of resonates with what we are thinking. Saikat, can you go to the next slide? So I mean, thanks for all the input, guys. I think what you have provided, and if you look at this slide, eventually any operational initiative that your organization or any organization for that matter will drive will have to be directly impacting either your employees, the bunch of equipment, or the facilities, and all of these have got very specific problems to address. For example, at an employee level, the critical problem at this point in time is how do we ensure social distancing while ensuring productivity. At an equipment level, it is about how we optimize equipment utilization, uptime, and time to service. At a facilities level, it is more about how do we control my operating cost, how do we prevent incidents, how do we monitor, manage my overall facilities. For each of this problem, there are very specific IoT solutions available in the market, some of which you can see on the slide itself. We at Tata Communication as well do have a complete solution suite which addresses all these existing problems. Saikata, can you go to the next slide? The slide is not visible. Yeah, okay, it's visible now. Thanks. So as I mentioned, at Tata Communications, we do have a complete product suite catering to a lot of these essential kind of services. We work along with enterprises to understand the problem area, consult them on potential solutions, help them prioritize, co-develop, and deploy solutions at scale. For some of our marquee solutions, we do have an end-to-end connected employee solution, which is in the form of a smart safety wearable and a smart ID card, which enables not only to monitor health, safety, and productivity, but in recent time, it can also be used in terms of ensuring COVID norms are also followed. For equipment and facilities, we have our own suite of tracking, monitoring, managing, and mitigating solutions, which sort of enable on and off of equipment, remote monitoring, any kind of incident prevention features that we have. Examples being asset trackers, temperature humidity sensors that we have, utilities monitoring kind of solutions, which sort of enable us to prevent incidents as well. Overall, any IoT solution and overall in terms of globally, any IoT solution will have four components. One is the sensor, which you see on the screen right now. The another is the connectivity, which is a bit of a ubiquitous element into it. Connectivity is nothing but from the sensor. How do you take the data back to your application, cloud, and others? The next layer is your platform, which is more about about how do you start collating all this platform or this data, all the sensor data into a single layer, and finally the overall application and analytics layer. Very few technology companies actually provide the entire suite. We are one of them. We provide all the 4 elements onto a solution, and it's basically IoT in a box is something which we work with enterprises and we try and work along with them. Let's take a deep dive into one of the most critical use cases that in the current scenario we are getting a lot of interest and lot of curiosity around, which is how do we get employees back into my facility? Saikata, can we go to next slide? So if you look at this slide, getting employees back into the facility and making your workplace safer is right now becoming the most critical most critical element into it. The obvious 3 things that enterprise has to take care of: how do we detect a potential COVID risk, how do we prevent COVID risk via social distancing or a contactless attendance or tracking, how do we continue to create awareness around the entire COVID scenario. Enterprises and facilities, and I mean we have seen our customers also sharing a lot of SOPs within their enterprises, right? That you are not supposed to you are supposed to come, you need to do some self auditing, you need to tell us whether have you traveled or not. So these are some self auditing tools that enterprises have started using. There are SOPs defined in terms of when somebody goes into a canteen or somebody goes into a common area, what kind of SOPs has to be followed. There are sanitizers put across. Eventually, as and when employees will start returning to your facilities, there will be primarily 3 touch points that you need to manage. One is enabling a seamless entry into the facility. Now, this is something which we are seeing mostly being driven through thermal checks that happen at the gate, or a self-declaration mode, as we mentioned, or even a mobile app check. Now, I think Arogya Setu is actually building up towards that you can actually look at Arogya Setu historical data and try and figure out whether this guy has gone somewhere else or not. Then comes within the campus. Once employee enters the campus, how do you ensure social distancing? How do you ensure the the worker is working or the employee is actually working in the designated area where he's supposed to work? And in case of a positive case, how do you start doing contact tracing? These are some of the elements which are coming across apart from productivity, which is part and parcel of any connected employee solution. Another interesting thing which we have heard is outside the campus. Now, organizations want to know that once my employee is outside the campus or traveling from his home to the campus or vice versa, we want to know where is he going. We want to know, is he going in a red zone? Is he going and meeting potentially risky people? Is he a risk for my organization? Now, this is something where there is a very thin line of privacy. And I think that's where, again, but organizations are asking for it. And there are solutions and companies who are working towards providing such kind of solution. Now, there are multiple solutions, multiple technologies available which cater to all these 3 different scenarios. Saikata, can you go to the next slide? So what we have done is all the solutions and technology which are available in the market right now can be categorized or bucketed into 3 broad categories. One is a video-based solution, which is more of a thermal imaging, facial recognition kind of a model, which can be used for tracking employees, not only tracking but also detecting temperatures of the employees. And this is at an entry level gate. You can do that. Mobile-based app, that is something which is a low-touch kind of a solution. Again, use, I mean, from organization to organization, trying to see where this guy has been overall. And finally, the variable or the edge-based solution, which is far more accurate in terms of within the campus kind of solution, is far more accurate, trying to figure out where this guy has been within the campus, with whom all has he been talking to, is he working in this designated area and all. Each solution has a specific use case, as I mentioned about it. And at Tata Communications, we do have a very comprehensive connected employee solution, which is driven through our safety variable and our smart ID card. We'll dig a bit deeper into that solution as well. Saikata, next slide. So our connected employee solution enables enterprises to capture employee health and vitals. If you look at the right side of the slide, our safety variable, for example, captures employee vitals like heart rate, skin temperature. It can detect fall and immobility. And at the same time, you can know between both these solutions, you could come to know where the employee is within the campus. You could geofence, you could determine that these are the areas this employee is supposed to be. And you could figure out which are the areas which are non-operational, non-accessible. All of these solutions have their own alarms and alerts which look into and which are inbuilt in terms of any time the threshold crosses, along with an SOS button. On top of this, on top of this, our solution also now enables an entire COVID portfolio or a COVID portfolio features, starting with contactless entry exit. Your employees can just simply walk into the plant and you can still figure out where, what time the employee came in, what time the employee went out. You could monitor employee health. That is anyways the default feature of our safety variable. You can prevent overcrowding. So in a particular area of your plant or your facility or your office, if more number of people start gathering around, you could actually get an immediate alert in terms of overcrowding, that people are getting, too many people are close to each other. You could drive social distancing. If two people are near to each other with less than 2 meters or any kind of, it's a configurable thing, any kind of distance, the devices will start displaying, or the devices will actually sound a big buzzer. And at the same time, it will also take note of, with whom this person was in touch with. The benefit of all of this is eventually you don't only instill a social distancing behavior, but at the same time, in times of crisis, wherein a positive case comes into your facility or a plant, you could at least be able to figure out who all were the contacts with whom this person, he or she, was in touch with in the last 10 days, 15 days, and thereby trying to ensure a faster operational kickback. Second, again, go to next slide. So this is just an example or just a visual depiction of what I just mentioned, that how our solution sort of has the ability to detect, track, and alert risky scenarios. So in a COVID situation, there are three primary risky scenarios apart from the employee health. One is obviously zone and overcrowding. Within a zone, multiple people coming in. Second is the social distance alarms, people coming near to each other. There is a social distance alarm that goes in. And the final thing is the contact tracing. Now, we've got companies, and while the regulation as of now, the Indian regulation says that anytime there is a COVID positive case, the government sort of looks into what we call shutting down the operations for a certain number of days and all. We believe that eventually, once this contact tracing algorithms, not only of our solution, but other solutions, whichever are there in the market, becomes more and more perfect, there will be an incentive for companies to put and deploy the solution, so that if there is a positive case, the company can proactively tell the government agencies, these are the 10 people with whom this person was there in contact with, and any tertiary contacts that are there, and thereby reducing the operational risk or the operational shutdown risk for that matter that might come in. We believe that's where eventually things will evolve in the coming time. Shaikat, next slide, please. While the topic today has been around COVID, around IoT, and we talked about a bunch of COVID features on connected employee solution and a bunch of other technologies and resource efficiencies and all. On COVID itself, or on this connected employee solution itself, in addition to the COVID features, primarily a connected employee solution definitely helps an enterprise to take more decisions around employee productivity, job assignments, fatigue management, employee safety behavior. You can eventually go and actually start negotiating employee and contractor rate cards basis the productivity numbers that you actually get out of it. And many more analysis. As and when the data becomes more and more richer, this kind of analysis can actually drive a lot of your employee related cost and employee related productivity. And Lalit did mention in terms of the cost, right? Typically 20% is our employee cost. So this is a huge bucket in terms of how an impact can be driven in an organization. Overall, before I conclude, the time is right now to relook at all the different technology initiatives. All the CIOs, CDOs, and the operations head need to get together, relook at all the different technology initiatives, prioritize them, and start executing them. Not only to ensure sustainability and resilience, but also create a platform to start reimagining the business model in this new COVID world. We at Tata Communication do look forward to working with all of you in this journey. Just to recap, Saikat, can you go to the next slide? Just to recap, I like to leave you with some of these basic 4 pointers. The broad message is COVID will and is actually changing the way we operate and behave in the AC, which is nothing but the after Corona era. Businesses will bounce back eventually. There will be an inherent demand. It's just that the fear, psychosis, and everything is there. Eventually, businesses will bounce back. Companies which are agile and futuristic and forward looking are the companies which will have an opportunity to take advantage of this bounce back. Finally, serious technology adoption and execution is the need of the hour. Before I conclude, the images on the right side are on a very light humor. I understand you. I mean, we've given you a very heavy dosage of COVID technology and IoT. I hope this image is at least lighten up the mood a bit. And with this, we would like to open up the session for a Q&A.
I would like to thank both the speakers, and we have some questions here from the participants. And I would leave it to you, Lalit or Rajiv, whoever wants to answer that. Now, we start with the first question. How big equipments can be 3D printed using current technologies? Are these technologies available in India? And if you can elaborate.
Rajiv, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So right now, 3D technology, and I think this is one of the trends and the technology to look out for. 3D technology right now is available for big machinery and big deployments as well. But in India, at least, we haven't seen that happening as of now. It is still a costly affair. I mean, we ourselves, when we do our own equipments or when we do our own sensors, we actually go for 3D printed ones, and we know that for a fact that it's still on an early stage, but that's a trend to look out for eventually.
Okay, I'm just 3 questions that were similar in nature. As an MSME from the auto sector, textile or chemical, if we want to get started in IoT, how should I proceed on the same in my organization?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. This is Lalit here. See, starting an IoT journey is not really a rocket science. I think IoT is a buzzword, but it is actually meant to be solving, the basic business problems and issues really. One way to look at it is that most of these companies or most of the kind of organizations that you talked about in auto and I think textile and a few others are either going to be outside the major city areas and coverage and all that. So the network connectivity can actually become one challenge. So one should look at an IoT solution provider which brings an end-to-end solution on the table, right? So in India, currently you will actually find a solution provider which will say, hey, you can actually use my device and that connects to any network and I'll give you an application that you could actually use. But in reality, if you don't have a connectivity, a reliable, trusted source of connectivity, secure connectivity, then your IoT story is actually not complete. So you need to have, you need to go for a provider which provides you a device which is certified, that will actually work in rugged conditions and so on, connects to the right network. That network connects to a secured cloud, and then your secured cloud connects to, your application for your IoT, for your UI and UX consumption really. So that's on the technology side. On the business side, again, some of the things I have seen personally in my last 3 years of IoT experiences. There are organizations who have a digital mandate, so they will be somebody who's either part of the CIO's organization or or somebody who's part of a CDO's organization that directly reports into the CEO of the company to run digital transformations in that organization to either gain efficiency, cut cost, and increase revenue. These are the 3 areas that they will actually look at deploying a solution. So it can start small. It could be a small pilot that you could begin. For example, Rajiv touched upon people tracking for safety and productivity purposes. So one could actually start small. You could do a handful pilot for 100 users, 200 users, and so on, and then scale it up as soon as you start seeing results. One use case that I want to share with you is that there is one. So one of our customers actually started small. They did what we call as proof of concepts in 2 remote areas in India. They tested the solution in different environments, different terrains, and so on. and then they scaled it up for thousands of workers across the country. Today, by deploying the productivity measures and efficiency that they have brought in with this IoT implementation that they've done, the whole project has actually become self-funded, which means that they've actually recovered the cost of whole deployment in last 1 year. So one has to start small, and one has to look at a solution provider which brings in all the components of IoT and not just the device or one or two other components. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, I think we should start small, and then maybe after we can scale it up. That's what you mean. So we have the next question. Organizations are facing constraints, including cash flows. Mindsets of organizations are also becoming narrow, or you could say they're cautious. So can IoT add value or bring a win-win in the present scenario?
Yes, I'll take this one again. One has to look at IoT solutions as not something like a damage to their cash reserves, but an investment that will eventually help them to save cost. And the return of investment can actually be fastened up if you are looking at the right area of deployment. That's one way to sort of look at it. I think that's the mindset bit that I'm talking about. The second bit that I'm talking about is, if one is not sure of, and most of the organizations that we see around haven't actually gone in for very large IoT deployments. I would say that we have been on the forefront of having done thousands of workers or thousands of other asset trackers kind of implementations in various cities in India. But most of the IoT deployments have been small scale and so on, really. As I said earlier, one has to look at starting small, and if you see the results coming in 1 month of time, 2 months of time, a quarter of time, and all that, then one shouldn't actually give up. Then one should take a decision to scale it up, and only when you scale it up, you actually see your return on investment coming in. So it's a journey. Each milestone should be sort of vetted and evaluated and all that, and then the scale up decision has to also happen for you to see the results.
Just to add, if I may, the point is is not about ROI, no, but it's also about the long-term vision that the company has. And as Lalit mentioned, right, eventually the you will start seeing ROI, maybe not immediately, but it's a long-term game eventually, and companies will have to stay invested in it to give and get more and more benefit out of it.
Okay, now the next question is, how does IoT help in cleaning the air quality in HVAC? How does it help in restarting the HVAC system and killing bacteria in the lines?
Rajiv, can you take that one with the sensors?
Yeah. So look, IoT is all about developing and defining sensors, and as we did mention that there would be, like, we right now don't have a ready sensor which does all of these things, but there are sensors out there in the market which can detect air quality, which can detect your environment in terms of any kind of hazardous environment, hazardous gas, or any kind of other hazard that could be there in the air. Now this is where there are sensors available which can actually communicate back to your network and communicate back to you as well. Now just to step back into it, any kind of sensor is actually possible to build, right? It's a matter of what is the use case, what is the problem, that specific problem that a company wants to address, and there are sensors out there in the market. And as I mentioned in when I was talking, is eventually a sensor is nothing but it will sense a particular thing, whether it's whether it's an environment, whether it is a gaseous environment, whether it is something to do with air quality, whether it is something to do with water quality. There are sensors available which can say whether it is good, bad, ugly, and those sensors eventually has to pass the data back onto a network, onto the application and all. So the answer to that question is yes, there are sensors available in the market which we can actually work on. And the second point is, can it actually help towards reducing the bacteria and all? So that's something which definitely I'm pretty sure would be there, a solution would be there. I don't have a ready answer to that right now.
Okay. Is the connected employee solution cellular based or over our LPWAN?
Lalit, I'll take that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the current solution, and I think Lalit did touch upon the point that typically a lot of these locations are in remote areas where you don't get proper GSM signals, or even forget proper. Sometimes you don't even get any GSM signal. So in such scenarios is where you require a layer of connectivity, where we have actually invested our solution onto a LoRaWAN or low powered wide area network technology. Now this is where we go into a plant and we set up our own proprietary private network, and thereby ensuring the network coverage is there throughout the plant. The messages are anywhere in the plant. If an employee is there, he or she can actually send a message back to the network, and thereby we at least ensure resiliency in the network and ensure uptime of the connectivity that we want to provide to our customers as well.
Okay, so which means that this other question is the connected employee solution ensuring employee ID as well?
So in connected employee solutions, we have got two sets of products. One is the safety wearable product, which is more towards employee health, safety, and the overall productivity side of the story. Whereas the Safe Pass or the Smart ID card, as we call, it has actually got a slot. The Smart ID card has got a slot wherein you can actually put in your normal employee RFID card. Typically, every company will have its own access card and an access mechanism, which anyways is already installed and already applicable. So our Safe Pass already has a slot in which you can actually put in a smart RFID card. On top of it, I mean, anything else that a company actually wants to invest. I mean, we've had companies who have come and asked us, can you integrate our RFID access into the ID card itself? Or can you further enhance all of these things? These developments is something which we can definitely look into. But right now, as we speak, the card has a slot to fit in your access card, and thereby it actually becomes your access into your company or into your enterprise.
Okay, another question. How does IoT impact construction real estate industry, which is manpower driven, especially unskilled and semi-skilled personnel?
So I'll just touch upon that, and Rajiv, you can expand it. See, for the Safe Pass or the worker ID solution that Rajiv talked about is actually meant for unskilled or contract worker labor kind of manpower who could use it very effectively. So if you remember, if you saw the picture of the device, it has a small button in it. That button can be pressed if they feel they're in panic, and that could actually start the whole rescue operation. Can you locate them faster and then start the whole rescue operation? It also has a buzzer which will actually buzz if they go in any unauthorized or any hazardous area that they're not supposed to be going, and all that, which is kind of these kind of places you actually find quite common in construction and real estate sites. So for real estate or construction, or for that matter, any other industry which deploys a large contract workforce where the literacy levels are lower, this solution works in very, very well.
Yeah.
Another question. Okay.
No, I think go on. Another question. That's fine.
Okay. So how IoT is going to help in retail in the brick and mortar sector?
There are many ways that it can. In retail, we have seen a large anonymous feedback is a need of an hour. So when you go into stores, what the experience of the store is. If you could press a button, with a big smiley, then you're very happy. Short smiley, then you are kind of okay. But if if you have a sad face, kind of thing, there you press that button, then you're not happy with that feedback. So that's an IoT sort of use case. The data is collected on a real-time basis. You don't need to, give any more information. You can just press the button. You might have also seen this in airports and so on. So quick feedback, also quick service request. So for example, if you need some help in a large retail outlet, how do you sort of get through to the person who could come and assist you for a particular product that you may be looking at a supermarket and so on? So can there be a small button that could be pressed, in an aisle or so for you to get help faster? So those are some of the use cases which which can go a long way in terms of increasing customer satisfaction and also increasing efficiency in operations.
So just to add on to it, look, store experience or buying experience is again something wherein IoT can play a major role. I mean, when you say store experience, it is all to do in terms of what is the ambience of the store. Is my temperature, cool enough? Is the customer the air quality within our store? In fact, we have got a request from a brand who wanted to understand, and this was a Delhi-based brand. I mean, apologies to people who are based out of Delhi, but a Delhi-based brand actually reached out to us saying that, can you look into our stores? And I mean, the way we want to position is that if you are shopping on our stores is much better than you walking on the streets. Right. So can there be some solution which you can actually depict? So store experience actually becomes a critical element for some of these big brands, retail stores, outlets as well. And along with the feedback part, which Lalit mentioned. I mean, the possibilities are enormous from an IoT standpoint.
And the ambient temperature.
Okay. Next question is, are there ready-made LoRa modules available for connecting to Tata LoRa networks in India?
Rajiv, go ahead.
So right now we do work with a bunch of certified LoRa partners with whom we enable those modules, and any sensor and any device. So we do have our own ecosystem certification program in place. For any sensor, any device that a company or a partner actually develops has to go through that process, wherein our team actually goes ahead and certifies the sensor, goes through it, and from a security perspective and the LoRa protocol perspective. And once it passes through it, we actually enable that device to connect to our network. And on modules also, we do work with a bunch of companies within India and outside India as well, who provide us modules which at least are adhering to some of our specifications. More we can talk. I mean, you guys can connect with us offline and we can share more.
In the local solutions, how large is the technology gap specific to automation and Industry 4.0 tools in the manufacturing sector? Do we have the capability to develop and execute?
Yes, answer is yes. We are, in terms of our capabilities, we are constantly increasing our capability to develop and execute solutions locally. In fact, when we started 2.5 years back, 3 years back, when our solutions were seeing the light of the day, we were working on the mandate given by the Prime Minister of the country back then on Make in India. So we work with a lot of local partners. In fact, some of our solutions that are lighting up the streets in Noida, Jamshedpur, Ahmedabad, and Vadodara are actually developed locally, the other safety, and safety passes solutions that Rajiv talked about were also developed locally. So this actually gives us a lot of joy and pride in saying that these solutions are made in India and made for India, and because they are made for India, and if it can actually work in India, that can actually work very easily overseas as well. So short answer to that is yes.
Okay, there's another question. Will IoT not infringe on privacy, the ethical part of it, especially if we are exploring tracing, etc.?
So, most of our solutions that we talk about, actually all of them, are built for enterprise consumption, right? So this remains as enterprise data, and it is a pact between an employee and the enterprise in terms of how much is sort of taken as an enterprise data and how much is left for privacy. For example, um, the safety wearable product that Rajiv talked about actually takes a skin temperature and a heart rate every 10 minutes from employees body, the sensors that are there, and puts it on an enterprise data cloud, that data which is later used for analytics and so on. And the same device also sort of it looks at if there are any thresholds being breached. For example, if the heart rate goes up or down or the skin temperature goes up or down, it actually sends alerts for the rescue to happen. Initially, when we were doing this project, we were faced with a lot of challenge in terms of people not accepting the tracing and tracking and the vital parameters and all that. But after the implementation happened and after we were able to save a lot of lives, it has just become a way of life, really. So So some of these issues, if you will, are actually taken care by enterprise level agreements that they have with their employees, and data is actually kept within the enterprise.
Another question is the thermal mapping camera you showed in your slide. Does that come with the software of video intelligence, which helps in identifying the temperature of the people?
Let me take that. So that is not a product which we as Tata Communications have in our product portfolio, but basis our market intelligence and basis what we have seen with some of these providers, the thermal imaging camera, which sort of tracks the thermal part of the story for all the employees at various parts of the plant, does come with a software, and again it varies in terms of what kind of software. Some of them actually come with a very heavy AI layer, which enables them to do a lot more rather than just do thermal imaging. Versus basic thermal cameras which just detect temperature. Some of them do have facial recognition systems in place. Thereby they are able to understand who is there where and eventually do the entire contact tracing. Now all of these have a varied commercial impact, have a varied deployment cycle. Some of them, I mean, apart from the basic thermal imaging camera, lot of them are in that POC or pilot stage. I mean, yet they are trying to prove the metal in terms of what and how they can deliver.
There's a question. What is the difference between wireless sensor network and IoT?
Rajiv, can you take that one?
Hello. I think I momentarily got dropped off.
Difference between wireless sensor and IoT. I think that's the question.
Yes.
I mean, theoretically, a wireless sensor can mean multiple things. It can sense data. It can send data. And what is an IoT device? An IoT device is nothing but something which senses data, transmits data, and alerts any kind of situation or scenario that could happen on it. So on paper, you could say a wireless sensor and IoT sensor are more or less the same at the end of the day. In fact, it could be a wired sensor also if it's sensing data and sending data. But at least in my understanding of IoT, and IoT would not be something which is sending real time, loads and loads of data. That actually falls under your industry 4.0 kind of a norm. An IoT sensor would be a sensor which would be just sensing certain situations and certain, anomalies that could happen in an operational or in a use case, and actually sends that trickle of data. That's at least in my definition, or at least my understanding. That is where I would like to put a thin line between an IoT sensor and a wireless real time, sending loads of data kind of a sensor.
Thank you. I think we are getting some similar questions which you've already answered earlier. So I would request all the attendees to kindly fill up the survey link that has been posted for all of you, and request Colonel to come on now and thank everybody.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you, Rajiv. It was a very, very interesting session, and I'm sure all the panelists would have learned quite a bit. And I'm sure there are many more questions which people are willing to ask you. I'll request you both to, if you can share your contact numbers or anybody's contact number or email ID, because there are a number of requests coming to me on a personal, on the host privately, asking the details of the contact people. So I'll request if you can just fill in the contact details of any person who can be contacted. I'll also request the participants who are still here to just fill in the link, the survey which has been posted here, just to give us a feedback of how the session went on. We'll be grateful. Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Lalit, once again. And thank you all the panelists for attendees for attending this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kalazari, feel free to pass our email IDs to the attendees. They can contact us and we'll take care of their
Yes,
and
we will
what
have
they're
to dig it down from their registration, because some people have not used their names also. They have used organization's name. We'll revert back.